Thanks for tuning in to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo podcast on the Overreaction Sports Network powered by The Lead. And now your hosts, former Director of Football Administration for the Buffalo Bills, Don Purdy, and former coaching assistant for the Buffalo Bills, Josh Cormier.
Welcome to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo. Don, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you, Joe Miller. I just noticed something pretty cool I never noticed before since we've been here with Overreaction. But during the intro, it somehow mutes our mics and then unmutes it as soon as it's over.
Indeed,
and we don't have to do anything. And we don't have to.
The magic of technology.
Ourselves from ourselves.
The magic of technology. Before we start on today's topic, Don, we have the opening drive that is presented by David Adams, the place that I am now employed by. Don, I've got three names for you. We're going to try to do each one in a minute or less. I've got a special opening drive for you today. Same first name for all three. Maybe some hot takes from you here. We're going to go with the opening drive, Doug edition. First one up, Doug Flutie. Go.
You're going to chime in here too? He was there for you.
No.
But okay.
Go ahead.
All right. No, it was.
What do you remember? What do you remember about Doug Flutie's contract?
It was very base. It was a low base, but loaded with incentives that looked ridiculous. Like it was just, he's never going to achieve this. He's never going to make the Pro Bowl. Wow, what a steal. And so when he did achieve those incentives, it was incredible. I mean, he was, everyone was thrilled. AJ Smith was the guy. He was the director of pro personnel. You remember his office?
Sure do.
With all the names on the wall, and signed him from the Canadian League, and everyone just thought, oh, this is part of that regionalization where we're trying to draw Canadian fans.
Right.
And maybe there was some of that, but that's usually not how football people think. But and anyway, we all know what happened when you're in the job after that 0-3. It was incredible.
All right, next one, Doug Whaley.
Doug Whaley. He was Buddy Nix's protege as kind of a super scout. And so the buzz was around the building pretty early that Buddy Nix was going to look to stay maybe 2 or 3 years, establish the roster, and turn the keys over to Doug Whaley. So he got more respect around the building because of that.
GM in waiting?
Being the GM in waiting than someone in that position normally would have gotten. And very nice guy.
Spill the beans. Who made the EJ Manuel pick?
Well, everyone, because he's a SEC or the Florida State ACC at the time. Really thought it was Buddy, but I mean, he was the top guy on the board in a year that was not good for quarterbacks. It was just kind of bad luck. He looked great early on, and then
Gotcha. Who made that pick? You think Doug Whaley really made that pick, or Buddy on his way out?
I think it was Buddy personally.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Third one, your close personal friend, Coach Doug Marrone.
He caught me off guard. He came in and just ball guns blazing. And I didn't know that much about him except he coached at Syracuse. And the first day I went in his office, I was just asking because I, help all the coaches move in. And he got really mad at me when I didn't know that Syracuse played a bowl game in Yankee Stadium.
Oh, God.
Like he thought I should have known everything. So I was kind of like, this is
the Pinstripe Bowl wasn't on your radar, huh?
No. Yeah. And he really, but then it's funny, after the first weekend he was there, he went back to Syracuse. I went back to the Adirondacks for a weekend, and we met just ran into each other at a thruway rest stop, and he introduced me to his wife. I introduced him to my wife. He's like, I can't wait for you to meet with Steven, our guy. He was so nice. And then the next day I went in there, and he was just barking at me as if the day before at the rest stop never happened.
Wow,
and,
really?
And it never got better.
Never got better. 2 years and out for Doug. We'll get more into him maybe in a later episode. So Don, I thought today's topic with training camp breaking, for the Bills, and then going back to one Bills drive and a preseason game coming up Saturday, the first preseason game against Caleb Williams and the Bears. Sean McDermott announced that the starters are going to play at least a quarter, which I think will be interesting for Josh Allen and the guys. I wanted to talk to you today about getting cut in the NFL. And there's different ways to be cut in the NFL, right? There's the way that I got quote unquote cut. There's the way you got quote unquote cut. Then there's the ways that other, coaches, personnel, and players get cut. And I thought people might be interested in kind of like the behind the scenes, in the weeds. You as the former director of football administration and a guy, who was hands-on on the salary cap. Maybe you could just take a couple minutes and describe to us like the logistics of actually releasing a player. Player is signed, there's 90 guys in the roster or whatever it was when you were there, and now
90.
When a guy gets released, like what exactly happens from the time that a coach comes to you or someone in your office and says, hey, we're going to release player X? What happens?
Yeah, sure. I definitely can take you through everything the entire time. One note I want to make, though, you talked about the starters playing a quarter and a half in the preseason. I heard the Jets were not going to play Aaron Rodgers at all in the preseason. Did that surprise you? Did you hear that?
I did, and it does not.
Why not?
Because Aaron Rodgers is fragile, and he lasted 6 plays. I guess I would just limit his exposure as much as possible. I wouldn't play him.
I understand that. I just, at that age and wanted to see if he wanted to just take a couple hits. But anyway, I was peculiar. I don't think I've ever heard a quarterback not ever playing at all in the preseason, but there's not much usual about his whole career. But anyway, so
what happens when player X, the name comes to you, he's being released?
Well, when I was there as director of football administration, I was told to, give him his last paycheck and coordinate with him how he was going to be paid. But I worked with the scouting department pretty closely, and they had the terrible job of actually going to tell the player. Now, what we had to do also is try to simultaneously tell the agent your guy's getting cut, and so sometimes the agent would find out before the player and tell the player, but everyone knew on the day of the cuts, and some guys were cut even before the day of the cuts. If it was obvious when they got out there, they were like, we don't want to pay for 4 weeks of a phantom hamstring injury here. Let's just do it right now. And usually there are about 4 to 5 guys that they could just tell on day one that let's not
like a backup kicker if they had a camp leg, something of that regard where they weren't going to hold on to the guy for the entire preseason.
Yeah, and some skill position, also. But on the day of the cuts, there was practice, and they were in the locker room, and one of the scouting guys, I see scouting guys as more football operations, would go down and just say, hey, coach wants to see you, bring your playbook. Later on, it was the tablet. So they knew. So they would go to meet with the head coach, and most head coaches want to do it personally because they did just spend a few months with the guy and, might have been part of drafting them, and they want to do the right thing and let them know. And they mean it. That we're going from 90 to 53, but stay in shape, and that was maybe one of the most gratifying things that ever happened with me was when I was doing rookie contracts. They would ask us if we were doing the contracts, we would see the whole thing through. So if our player was cut, we would have to tell their agent, and that was fine. Okay. But when they were discussing whether or not to cut a player that I had signed, a draft pick, we were in the office, and it was Tom Donahoe and 2 other football execs that you would know, but I'll leave their names out of it. But I just said to Tom, I said, want me to just tell him, hey, stay in shape because, you never know, be ready to come back. And the 2 other execs were like, no, there's no chance. Don't even bother saying that. And Tom was like, tell him, the agent, to tell his player to stay in shape because there is a high likelihood that he might come back. And wouldn't you know, he was back on opening day.
Interesting. Okay, well that's nice. So when you say that the agent, when you say that the player gets released and you have to have a final paycheck, if it's in the preseason, what's the player getting paid? Per diems?
Oh yeah, it's like whatever the CBA says it was, but it's like $1,200 a week.
Okay.
And the rookies were like $850 and the vets were $1,200, but the rookies would get, it started at $700. I think it got up to like about $1,000 by the time I was there. And so not a lot of money. And yeah.
So you would physically hand them the check on the day they're getting cut?
Yeah, they would be brought to my office. Yeah. And
Wow.
you just making the walk of shame through the hallways. And then there was, it was bad. It was horrible. And even if I didn't know the guy, just, you imagine that they're either drafted or, they go to camp and, in their hometowns, everyone's talking, hey, did you hear Joey
right.
He's on the Bills. He's there. And, in their head, they don't understand the cruel numbers game that it is that, Josh, that it's, 90 to 53s, that's not it. Those aren't great odds. And so when they're cut, their family's shocked. And, but,
how many players do you think you've interacted with over, your course of 15 years there as the director of football admin? How many players did you interact with right after they got cut? What's your guess?
Oh.
Couple hundred?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
What was if you had to give me the most popular reaction, do you think most of the guys knew?
I don't know. I mean, if they did, they didn't admit it. I never heard a guy say, man, I knew this was coming. Like, I never heard them say that because, at their colleges, they were the man, right? I mean,
right.
And they just assumed they had to have that confidence and cockiness that they're going to be on the roster and no matter what. And again, most end up either with another team or coming back or being on the practice squad. And when they come back in the practice squad, a couple weeks later, they're really uplifted. You could see it in their face. They're happy to be there and they know it's not, being 100% on the roster, but they're only one injury away from being on there. They're happy to make, $70,000 to play football, to practice football for the week and have maybe an opportunity. So, yeah.
Were you the first stop after like the head coach, position coach, and then you?
Yeah, I was probably the last stop before they went down to the van.
Oh, God. You were the last stop before the van? Was security normally with them? Was there somebody kind of following them around?
Usually it was one of the scouting guys. Security was around. They were aware, but they it usually was one of the lower level personnel guys.
Anybody really angry?
Oh yeah. Guys
How angry? How angry?
I mean, visibly, not smashing tables or anything, but like they just, you read people's faces and they were just pissed. I mean, yeah, they were
tears.
I saw tears. Yeah,
you saw. I can remember one person coming into your office with tears.
Oh,
so they got let
well, you brought up being cut. Is listen, when you're told you're shown the door, however it is. Yeah.
Did you? Okay, so fast forward. Once you got your walking papers, did you have a new appreciation for the guys who had been cut throughout all the years?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I did.
Not to say you're not a man with empathy and sympathy, and obviously, nobody enjoys watching somebody lose their job. I guess I just wonder if, after having that same experience yourself in a similar sort of way, whether you just kind of thought back to maybe some of those guys who didn't see it coming, who had no idea, and thought, "Oh my God, like I can."
Yeah. Certainly me and you had reason to believe that you were going to be kept on in some capacity too. But when it actually happens, the words you're like, did that really? Yeah, this is really
it's the not seeing it coming is the toughest part, right? Like there's obviously disappointment, and I'm sure a lot of the players, they might not want to admit it, but it's a numbers game, and if you're not getting reps in practice and you're getting time phased away as training camp goes on, it's probably not a shock. I would say to at least half of them, right? Probably fair.
If they were forced to admit it, yeah. The best part, though, the flip side, is when a player makes the team when he really knew the long odds that he was facing. A personal friend of mine that you've talked to here, I'd like to talk with him again, Brad Lamb. I remember this is, before dating ourselves here, before cell phones, but my job required me to go to the bank in the morning and it was cut day. And I had seen him. I got to know him a little bit, and I had just heard in the office. I had seen the final roster in the office on a piece of paper, it must have been, and I saw his name on there. I was like, "Holy cow! Wow, what a long shot! This is incredible." Anderson University. Brad caught a touchdown pass in the very last preseason game in the fourth quarter. He got a touchdown pass, like a 40-yarder from, I want to say it was like Gail Gilbert or something, but that must have just been enough for him to make it. They thought he was going to be a return guy, but I walked into the bank and he was there doing his own personal business, and I like started slapping him on the back and congratulating him. Like, hey, and he didn't know. He hadn't been told. I told him he made the team, and I'm like, "You're not messing with me." I said, "No, I sorry if this is out of place. I'm not normally how a player would find out he made the team, but I saw it. Geez, I hope I know what I saw."
Were you worried? Were you worried if that got back to him? If that got back, that'd be your last day there?
A little bit. I mean, it was an honest.
Sure.
It was an honest mistake. I saw what I saw, but man, I started panicking. Like, what if I saw was just someone I don't know? But it was he did. He made the roster.
Right. That's a much better story and a better faux pas of yours than when you sank the fourth pick in the draft from Texas offensive tackle. That we'll talk about that story again in our show sometime. Okay, so somebody then, when the cut list is made, when that name gets called, you also have to make not you personally, but the team has to make travel arrangements for them home, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, those are the personnel guys too, that usually lower level guys. They're sort of they're put through a little test there to see how they handle that, and if they're really ready for this business. And that's one of the harder ones. But when they would come to my office and kind of prep me, and I remember they kept their mouths shut, but sometimes they would walk in and put the cut list in front of me on my desk and just tap it, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, and they're like, "Yeah, I didn't see that coming either." Like a veteran, I remember Fred Jackson. I'm like, "Wow, are you kidding me, Fred?"
I was gonna ask you that next. So when somebody gets cut, a rookie, first year guy, the team pays for the travel home.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no matter where it is. Yep.
Is it one of those things? What if there's not a flight like today?
Yeah, they have to be spend a lot of time at the airport.
That's tough, right? God, yeah. That's a tough day.
Yeah, or if the league says they're only allowed to be in the building for or the facility for 24 hours or something. After 24 hours, they're no longer allowed to be in the building because they don't want any team having unfair advantage, trying to sneak in, whatever. But if they're usually it's summertime, so there isn't really a problem with flights. But if not, they'll put them up in a hotel for an extra day, and they stay in contact with the scouting guys. Yeah.
So did this usually happen in the morning?
Oh yeah, happened in the morning. Usually up the day before too. Sometimes it would be if the cut day was a Tuesday, they would still do it on a Monday just to get it over with. If they knew, they would tell the agent and tell the player, "Look, we're giving you one extra day to help your agent knock on doors of other teams and see if you get a head start on maybe signing with another team."
Do you ever remember somebody being relieved?
No.
No. Okay.
No. I mean, I see why you'd ask. Maybe they thought, "Man, it was really hard," but I never thought someone would be like, "No." Again, the guys try to be stone-faced and make it hard to read, but I never picked that up or heard anyone say that. No.
Who were the 5 toughest cuts that you can remember, either personally or professionally, or guys who were around the building? It was a sad scene when they were let go. I mean, Freddie Jackson, you could start there. I'm sure that was a really difficult day. But who else can you remember that, either for you or for people around the building or for the player, that kind of stood out for just being sad?
Well, that's a really good question. You didn't usually feel too bad for veterans because they likely, depending on when they were cut, might still have had pay coming. But I think it was those guys who everyone watched during preseason games that were just tearing it up, running backs that or receivers that were leading the league in preseason.
The Yanel Jourdain All-Stars.
That's a great call right there.
Yeah.
And you'd think they must just be absolutely shocked, blown away, because, you know, as far as they knew, they were making it look easy out there, and you had to know everywhere they were going, like, dude, you're killing it, and yeah, wow, you're a lock, and then when they're not, it's a shock. But you got to remember, you know, people that are just seeing the preseason games aren't seeing the two-a-days or when they were happening, and all the other practices that were going on, and whether or not, you know, sometimes a running back busts a 60-yard run, and really, you know, it was just the offensive line made.
Quite ironically, the games probably have the least amount to do with somebody making the roster of anything in the preseason. They really do.
The games are more, as a point that you've brought up so well over the years, is just, you know, don't mess it up. Don't show that, you know, just do your job. It's not so much the result. It's just that you know what you're doing out there, that you understand the playbook and that. Yeah.
It's a dress rehearsal too, right? You know, it's can you perform on that stage? And
sure.
And it felt like to me that the staff had in mind where the vast majority of the cuts were going to go before we even played the first preseason game, you know, let alone the last one. So you did mention Fred Jackson. Like, was that a specifically memorable one for you?
It was, yeah, because usually, you know, when the guys are going around, you know, telling you who was going to be cut or whatever, they kind of shrug it off like, hey, it's just part of the business, right? But I remember when the guy brought me, I remember it was Casey Wild. He's with the Steelers now. But he came in, his eyes were huge. He's like, because Fred was having a great camp, and but he was just so beloved in the building. He had such a great story, and so happy to see him go to, was it Seattle for a while? I don't think they made the Super Bowl that year, but yeah, it was just the end of an amazing long shot story of a guy that, you know, came in with Marv, the co-college and all that, and he was just so good to everybody the whole time. Yeah.
Anybody ever hug you after getting cut?
Yeah, actually, yeah. There were guys like, hey, this
is it. Did you get the bro hug, like the Roger Goodell on like the reverse bro hug, the last one on your way out?
That's funny. Yeah. I was like, okay, if hey, it's been good. I kind of hope to see you again. You know, this doesn't necessarily mean you won't be back, but if it must be that you're doing that just in case. It's really funny you asked that question, because the guy we're going to have on next week, he was a backup linebacker. Josh Stamer was his name. Fans might know him. It was late 2009. He was special team standout that really kept him on the team. But I think he was one of those guys. Once I'm thinking, because I remember the guy who you could just tell he just spent most of his life in the weight room. And, you know, he does, like you said, the bro hug. You're like, oh, man, it's just.
He's going to be interesting to talk to in the perspective of, you know, a player on the bottom portion of the roster.
Yeah.
Who, you know, what his approach to camp was, and the idea of, hey, you know, one bad practice might be it. You know, every day's on film, and you don't have the wiggle room. You don't have the grace that, you know, the vets have. And if you're fighting every day to keep your job, you know, what is that week before, you know, cut down day? What's it feel like on cut down day, the day after cut down day? So I'm really interested and excited to talk to him. Did anybody ever like blame you? Not you directly, but did you ever catch anybody's wrath specifically?
I did, in a collective way. Like,
yeah, right.
You all.
I can't believe you guys did this.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I caught some shrapnel.
Any four-letter words?
Oh yeah.
Did you ever feel like physically not threatened, but would it have ever gotten to that point?
No, I never.
Did it ever with anybody in the history of the time you were with the organization, 35 years? Did you ever hear of? You don't have to mention names. Did you ever hear of anybody ever getting like physically aggressive when they got cut?
I did hear to this extent, where I heard there were shouting matches that, you know, with position coaches or wherever, that were face to face, and the only way I can describe it would be like a baseball manager with an umpire,
right?
Where they get, you can see the spit hitting. I heard there were some, confrontations that were that intense,
that heated. Wow. Okay, so let's go forward to when you were let go, and I can also speak to this for the last couple minutes here. When I was let go, it was February, so didn't see it coming. Really had no idea. Got called into Jim Overdorf's office and got told, and basically had like 20 minutes to kind of stammer around the building and kind of try to figure out like what, oh my God, what just happened. And then you're on your way home and it's, oh my God, like that just happened. Like now what? And I wonder for the players, like I actually thought about that. Like, man, these guys dedicate so much of their life and their body and their time. And, they're away from home. They're away from family. They're going to a place. A lot of them were never in Buffalo before and might not ever go back to Buffalo again.
Yeah.
Like that feeling of maybe emptiness or not having another shot in the NFL or whatever. Like, did you feel that too?
Yeah, to some degree. I think I thought about, how do I tell my family in a way that they're not going to feel like the sky is falling? And I feel like maybe that's how I could relate to when the players are going to, a guy's going to go home to a small town in rural Florida or Louisiana or Texas. And again, when he was at camp, to his family and friends, they just assumed the player was going to make it. And when he has to place the call back home and say, "Hey, I was cut," and on knowing what that was going to sound like on the other end of the phone, is just what you dread. You're going to be okay, but you just feel like all for these players, they've never not made it. I mean, they were the stars of. All the players that we've talked to, Josh, on the podcast, they were pretty much the stars of their team to the point where, oh, by the way, I ran track. I was a star of that too. Yeah. And I was a star in a basketball court.
Either big fish, big pond, or big fish, small pond. All of them.
Yeah. And if they were, even a big fish in a big pond, making the roster was never in doubt,
Right.
The NFL was, but still, once they got the call that, they say, well, here they go again. They're going to make this one too, and so and another factor really is the money, because a lot of these guys plan like, I'm finally going to buy my mom that house on the hill that she always wanted.
Yeah, I was 25 with a mortgage.
Yeah.
I was 25 with a mortgage. I that wasn't in the plan. Getting fired was not in the plan. Maybe it should have been, but it wasn't in the plan, right? And you had you had a wife and two daughters. Like, it's never a great time.
No, never is. So, but I do find, especially the questions you were asking, and again, you were there, you saw this, but it is interesting, but it is depressing. But I think that it's real. It's what happens, and the exciting part is, when the roster is set, it's go time. Everyone's got a fresh start. They're 0-0, and their journey continues, and that's where we're a little ahead of the game here in terms of when cuts are actually going to be. We're pretty good in the way we decided to do this episode, but the next step is super exciting.
So a couple more different scenarios before we wrap it up. Did it ever feel different if a guy got traded?
Yeah, it did, because they at least knew that they were of value to the place where they were going. Maybe they wanted to stay here, but the flip side of the coin is, hey, the team where I'm going wanted me enough to give something up for me.
Do you remember a scenario like this year's Steph Diggs scenario where the player very clearly wanted out of Buffalo and kind of got his way? Do you remember one like that where somebody was actually relieved to be traded out of here?
The one that comes to mind is Marshawn Lynch. When he thought he was going to be a star here for a long time, and when Buddy drafted CJ Spiller, he was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Right. Don't blame him.
Yeah, he didn't mind sharing the football with Fred. Yeah, Fred was a great number 2 back, and they got along really well. But he was just shocked. He held out, and when he came to camp, it was actually at the stadium before camp. It was a mandatory mini camp. No one knew if he was going to come, but he did, and I guess he just shredded the defense like he absolutely
angry run,
angry, and then he got his way and went to Seattle and was angry in a way that worked for him and caught the attention of the whole league. But
did you see him on the way out?
I saw him that weekend. I mean, yeah.
But you didn't interact maybe in the same way with the guys that might be traded,
right? No, because I think there was a gap. There was an intensity that I saw with him that weekend in his eyes, and like it almost like looking past you.
I got you.
And when he got traded, I don't recall whether he was even in the building the day he was traded. So it's not like I saw him leave. But
all right, one more scenario here. So the 53-man roster is set. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets through cut down day. And with the guys that always killed me were the guys that then get cut.
Oh, that's brutal, isn't it?
So talk to me. Do you remember a specific scenario like that where the 53 is set and then for whatever reason, some guy gets cut, a day later, 2 days later, before the first game?
Yeah, that happens because, the player personnel directors, they are always scouts at heart. And they look at the rosters from all the other 31 teams, and they'll see a guy on another roster get cut, and they're flabbergasted, and they're like, I cannot believe they cut him. We must have him. They have like an obsession. And obviously, they sign him off at other teams' practice squad or just sign him as a street free agent. And, you have to create room for that player. So a guy that might happen 3 days after, 2 or 3 days after cuts, maybe even the next day. And when they bring that guy in, the player
that gonna go
the day before thought he had made it, something the next day.
To me, that's the crueler. That's the cruelest one. And Wade always used to tell the guys, you're not only competing against the other guys in this room, but you're competing against every player in the NFL to make the 53. Because you're not only in competition with the 8 other linebackers in the linebacker room, but there's 200 linebackers around the NFL.
Yeah.
And if one of those guys get let go and we think they're better than you, we're going to bring them in. So you're not only in competition with everybody in this room, but you're in competition with 31 other teams. That's tough.
That is tough. It's fair. It's fair of Wade to point that out to them so they're not blindsided and a competition is the best thing, but it's like you said, it's still cruel.
Yeah, the worst is to get through cut down day. You're announced on the 53, and then all of a sudden, a day, 2, 3 days later, they bring somebody in who was cut by the Jaguars or Houston or whatever else, and then you're gone. And back then the practice squad was only 5 guys.
True.
Now it's what, 15? It's what, 15 now?
Is it up to 15? Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I believe so.
8 and 12. Yeah, incrementally it keeps getting up there. But it does happen every year. Exactly the scenario that you just laid out happens every year.
Wow. Yeah. That's the worst one. Who do you remember, on a more positive note to end it up here, who can you remember having an interaction with after they found out that they did make the team that really made your day?
That they did make the team. Aside from Brad, who
other than Brad,
that's an extraordinary situation. It was a player that we talked to on our podcast, and I'd love to bring back again. But the one that jumps out is Jabari Greer. He was
why?
He was shocked that he wasn't drafted. He was University of Tennessee, and then he was a corner, and he started at Tennessee. Played in bowl games and Florida, all that. And Rashad Baker, neither of them were drafted, and they were both shocked. And then Rashad Baker, and they were both signed as undrafted free agents. They worked their tails off, and they made the team. So it kind of came full circle to where they always thought they should have been playing in the NFL, but then they weren't. But then they were, and there was just such a, when you see that player for the first time after they make the roster, you congratulate them, and some guys just try to act cool, like, oh yeah, thanks. But I remember just saying it to Jabari and he's like, oh man, I'm so happy. Like, I can't remember if I got a hug or whatever, but he goes, I really appreciate that. And man, I'm gonna be like he has to prove it to me, man. I'm not gonna let you guys down, and you guys taking a chance on me. I'm gonna
life changing.
Sure
It's life changing.
Yeah. You guys are all here gonna be not gonna regret it. And I'm like, I'm sure not, but yeah, I remember him being one of the most excited. And you remember when you talked to him, he had that personas, and that's exactly how he was when he found out.
Hard on his sleeve. I really enjoyed him. I'd love to talk to him again. Yeah. Any final thoughts for us as we roll on? And Hard Knocks is on on Max right now, and people get behind the scenes view of all the stuff and the famous clips of guys getting cut. Like, any final thoughts about either you, me, or a player, coach, staff getting let go on cut day?
Yeah, Hard Knocks would be they were never there, and I when I was
guys
there
weren't interesting enough.
Yeah. But I always wondered how that would, people do different things when they're out there on camera. I always wondered how different people would act when they were on camera. That's kind of
how do you think you think you would have been a good character on Hard Knocks?
Nah, I'd have been pretty boring.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see you were like the straight man in there, right? Like the bean, you and Jo would have been the two bean counters walking down the hallway.
I wouldn't.
The Grim Reaper.
I don't know that anyone. Hey, can you believe what Purdy said on Hard Knocks? I was.
Yeah.
But
I mean, other than getting Mike Williams cut, you really never had said anything of any controversy over the years, right?
Yeah. I'll let that just hang out there. And...
Thanks. All right. Hopefully everybody really enjoyed the episode tonight. I hope that you like and subscribe to If the Walls Could Talk in Buffalo podcast on the Overreaction Network. Please like and subscribe to Joe Miller, to Jerry Ostrowski, John Fina, and the Believe Network. And Don, we will see you next week. Thank you.
Sounds good, Josh. See ya.